Housing supply and demand, current update. So let's go through some stats. The number one rule in economics is supply and demand. And when we talk about the housing industry, let's first talk about household formations that are creating the supply. Or lack of supply. So what is a household formation anyways? Well, it's basically where a kid grows up and decides to leave the household with the parents. And so he or she decides to leave and they've now formed another household. They go to rent, they buy a house, they move into a condo, they turn on the electricity, and there's a new household formation. It could also be a spouse that decides they're done, they split, one keeps this house, the other one goes to rent or buy, and now we have another household formation. So this is important when we look at this graph, that the green represents the overall average since 2005. That's where you see all these little squiggly lines of where was the household formations. And you can see obviously COVID right here. We're still in the red. So we're at an abnormally high formation rate at the $1.4 million. So they're still being formed. People are still splitting, leaving the house, go to get another one, leaving their spouse to go now live in a new residence. That's a new household formation. Now, the second part is to talk about the brand new housing supply. Now, how's that created? That's new build homes. That's the builders decide to start a home. Now, we got to go into the right numbers here, because if you go off of what's called a housing start, that's 1.7 million homes that are being started right now. We always have to take out an average of 100,000, because that's the number of homes, unfortunately, get wiped out with tornadoes, hurricanes, other natural disasters. And so we need to watch out that we don't count those numbers, because those are going to just get eaten up right away, because I was just displaced. They built me a new home. I get right into it. So let's take that number out. That leaves us at 1.6 million. Now, when we look at new housing demand, so this is the new housing supply. Let's talk about new demand. You've got the household formations we talked about at 1.4 million. You've got a surplus of about 200, because we're at 1.6. We take the 1.4. That's a 200 surplus. Here's where you got to dig deeper into those numbers. You have 1.3 that are actually completed. So we can't go over housing starts. That's how much they're literally like just digging the hole to get the foundation poured. We want how many are done, certificate of occupancy, ready to move in. That's 1.3 million. Take out the 100,000 we talked about due to natural disasters, and you have 1.2 million in brand new supply. Yet we just said there's 1.4 that are being household formations. That means we have a shortage of about 200,000. That's again where we get to supply and demand. So now let's look at record low home inventory. So over the years, you can see the bubbles. This is from 18 all the way down to 22. This is not a rocket science, but you've been seeing this. But the thing to be aware of is the trends. And these bumps up here, just like we're starting to form a bump right here, where people are saying, oh, we're going to see a crash. We're seeing a lot of houses on the market. This is weird. It's not weird. Every spring, there is new homes being formed. This goes back 5 years, going back here to show you that in the spring, and the theory is that a lot of people list their homes in the springtime because they're going to move during the summer to get established so their kids can go to school. That way, when they're going in on day one and not like a mid-year transfer, which is really awkward. So in an optimal world, a family would like to move during the springtime, summertime, so they have to list in the spring to move in the summer to have their kid ready to go to school in the fall. So to be aware of this slight trend here, this is normal, not abnormal. Now, as we go to existing home inventory, you have the existing homes right now on the market at 1 million. Yet that number is not accurate unless you remove 600,000 that are actually under contract. They just haven't closed yet. So technically that only leaves 400,000 available for people to buy. Again, there's that supply and demand. There's not as many as you think. That's 40% that are even available. So take a look at this chart. This is going to show you how right now there's that 40%. But let's go back in time. June of 2016 with 1.55 million homes, there's only 75% of market available. 75% available versus here 40%. So when you look at those numbers, we're now only 33,000 from the lowest it's ever been. So now you see that with the active existing inventory, there's not that many available. Not as many as you might think. Way more available back in 2016. Now, we're an all-time low vacancy rate. Now, the reason why we bring up this vacancy is because you will see price reductions on vacant homes. If someone owns two homes, one's their primary, one's their investment property, and they say, well, someone just moved out of my investment property, it's vacant. Now I have a vacancy. And they have all this upkeep that they still have to, carrying costs, we call it. So you have your electricity, your HOA, you're mowing the lawn, you're keeping the water running. Those are all expenses where they say, you know what, let's just get rid of this and it doesn't matter. Let's just I want it gone. So price it under the market so it just goes. That's where you might see some of those properties where they go fast. Now, notice that this is back in 2006. They were close to a 3% vacancy rate. So that's where you saw a decline in those prices back during the crash. High vacancy rate. Now we're at 0.8 vacancy rate currently right now in the US. Now, although every market is a little bit different, you can see how the housing market is very healthy and still strong. Most of the things are very seasonal. We are seeing the lower demand only due to the interest rates coming up on the buy side. Yet you're still seeing, with moderate interest rates versus the low 2%, that moderate interest rate, you're still seeing such a high demand due to the low supply. So even though demand has come down, the supply is still super low for those household formations, and they cannot build enough with the new home inventory. Look, reach out if you have questions. I'm happy to dive into this further for you in your specific market and see if now is an opportune time for you to get in the game. Thanks for tuning in.